Hello friends, in view of pre-promotion exams in general insurance public sector companies, today we have brought to you a brief overview of motor insurance and third-party claims. As we all know, this Motor Vehicles Act, which was originally enacted in 1939. Then subsequently the Motor Vehicles Act 1988 was made effective from 1st July 1989. It was amended twice majorly in 1994 and 2001. If we say about 1994 amendments, there were like few points over it that we'll discuss after this overview. So it has 14 chapters, 217 sections. In chapter 10, 11 and 12 deal with the third party insurance and claims. That is what we are concerned about for our examination purpose. This comes under section 140 to section 176. So as we were talking about the amendments, recently there was one amendment in 2019 for about which my friend will be taking a session on. I will briefly touch upon the amendment which was made in 1994, but let me first give you a little bit overview on what exactly is the position now. Say chapter 10 talks about no fault liability, chapter 11 about insurance of motor vehicles against third party risks, and chapter 12 deals about the powers of claims tribunal. Now again coming back to the amendment of 1994, there were a couple of points over there. One was introduction of section 163A, that is the structured compensation payable on the no fault liability basis. Amendment to section 147 to include owner of the goods or his authorized representative carrying the vehicle. They were made they can make a claim as well. Apart from the third party coverage, the coverage was also extended to the owner of the goods or his authorized representative carried in the vehicle. Section 146 was amended that in case of a vehicle carrying or meant to carry dangerous or hazardous goods, there shall also be policy of insurer under Public Liability Insurance Act. There was a time limit of 30 days introduced in section 158 subsection 6 for police authorities to inform the tribunal or the insurer about any accident which has taken place in their jurisdiction. Now coming again to the Motor Vehicles Act main provisions. First of all, we need to see what exactly do we call as a motor vehicle. Motor vehicle basically is a mechanically self-propelled vehicle, but does not include a vehicle running upon fixed rail or a vehicle of a special type adapted for use only in factory or in any other enclosed premises, or a vehicle having less than 4 wheels fitted with engine capacity of not exceeding 25 cc. This is our motor vehicle. Then there is a heavy goods vehicle. Any goods carriage or gross any goods carriage, the gross vehicle weight of which exceeds 12,000 kgs. Medium goods vehicle from gross vehicle weight of 7,500 to 12,000 kgs. Light motor vehicle is anything below 7,500 kgs. So this is briefly about the motor vehicles. Now we'll come straight away to chapter 10 of Motor Vehicles Act, which talks about no fault liability. So no fault liability basically means you need not prove the negligence on part of the vehicle at fault. You can just straight away claim the compensation, and based on the fact that the accident had taken place and a motor vehicle was involved in it, whether or not there was a negligence, the court will allow the compensation to be paid to the victim. The compensation paid in case of no fault liability under section 140 is for death 50,000, for permanent disablement it is 25,000. So compensation claim will not be reduced or defeated by reason of wrongful act or neglect of the victim. This is defined as an interim compensation under section 140 subsection 5. That means it is not the final compensation. The court will make an award, and whatever the final award is, this interim compensation will be deducted from that particular award. Section 141 of Motor Vehicles Act, it says the provision as to others right to claim compensation for death or permanent disablement. It means that right to claim compensation under section 140 is in addition to any other right on the principle of fault under section 141(1). This is provided under section 141 subsection 1. And section 140 application under section 140 has to be expeditiously disposed, and as we have already told you, once if the final award comes over, this no fault liability award is to be deducted from the final award to arrive at the compensation. If the final award is less than the no fault liability award provided under section 140, there is no need to pay final award. So now, as we have discussed about death and permanent disablement under section 140, we need to know what exactly is the permanent disablement. This is defined under section 142 as permanent privation of the sight of either eye, or the hearing of either ear, or privation of any other member or joint, or destruction or permanent impairment of power of any of the members of or joint, permanent disfiguration of head or face. Section 143 again says that the provision of this chapter, that is the chapter 10, shall also apply in relation to any claims under Workmen's Compensation Act. Section 144 gives an overriding effect of the provisions of this particular section. Now we come to some important provisions in chapter 11 of Motor Vehicles Act. Under section 145, there are two definitions which we need to pay attention on. First, the definition of property, which includes goods carried in a motor vehicle, roads, bridges, culverts, causeways, trees, posts, and milestones. And third party includes government. Section 146 talks about necessity for insurance. It says that no person shall use except as a passenger, or cause or allow any other person to use a motor vehicle in a public place unless there is a policy of insurance complying with the requirements of this chapter. That means to say that if the vehicle is on the road, it needs to have the insurance. It needs to have a third party insurance in place. Without it, it cannot be made use of in public place. In case of vehicle carrying or meant to carry the hazardous or dangerous goods, there shall also be policy of insurance under Public Liability Insurance Act. That means, apart from third party insurance, it needs to have insurance under Public Liability Insurance Act. It needs to have a policy under that Public Liability Insurance Act. There can be two exceptions to this section. One, any vehicle owned by central government or a state government and used for government purposes unconnected with any commercial enterprise. That means if it is used for government purposes unconnected with any commercial enterprise, it can be exempted for the necessity of insurance as provided under section 146. If the second exception is if the vehicle is used for government purposes connected with any commercial enterprise, provided fund is established to meet the TP liability arising out of the vehicle. Now we come to one of the most important provisions of Motor Vehicles Act, section 147. It provides requirement of policies and limits of liability. In a nutshell, it provides against which all liabilities this policy has a cover for. That means if insured incurs a particular liability, but if that liability is covered under this provision of Motor Vehicles Act or not, that is specified under section 147. First of all, the policy should be issued by an authorized insurer. Any person here there cannot issue a policy. It has to be issued by an authorized insurer. Then it insures the person or classes of persons specified in the policy to the extent specified under subsection 2. I am just reading out this section. It is plain and clear. We'll explain it in detail after once we go through it. It says it insures against any liability which may be incurred by the insured in respect of death or bodily injury to any person, including owner of goods or his authorized representative. As I have already told you, This was added by the amendment in 1994. Carried in the vehicle or damage to any property of a third party caused by or arising out of the use of the vehicle. That means it covers death, injury, and third party property damage. Then it also covers against the death or bodily injury to any passenger of a public service vehicle caused by or arising out of the use of the vehicle in a public place. So if a passenger is being carried in a public service vehicle, he is covered as a third party. He or she is covered as a third party if the vehicle is being used in a public place. Provided that a policy shall not be required to cover the liability in respect of death arising out of and in the course of his employment of the employee of a person insured by the policy in respect of bodily injury sustained by such an employee arising out of and in the course of employment other than a liability arising under Workmen Compensation Act 1923 in respect of death or bodily injury. That means a liability arising under Workmen Compensation Act is also covered under Motor Vehicles Act. This liability is should have arisen while the person is engaged in driving of the vehicle, if it's a public service vehicle engaged as a conductor of the vehicle or in examining the tickets on the vehicle, or if it's a goods carriage vehicle being carried in the vehicle. It is pertinent to note that any liability that is contractual in nature or which is incurred by virtue of a contract is not covered under Motor Vehicles Act. Now, Section 148 provides about the policy of insurance issued in reciprocating countries, and it covers liability in respect of motor vehicle of the reciprocating country operating on any route common to the two countries. Now, Section 149, subsection 4 provides for pay and recover provision. If the insurer pays for any liability that the insurer is not legally liable to incur or legally liable to indemnify, then the same may be recovered from the insured. Now we come to the next important provision of Motor Vehicles Act, that is Section 149, subsection 2. It provides for the defences available to the insurer. That means if a case is filed in the court of law against the insurer for payment of compensation, then the insurer can take a plea that these were the conditions which were violated in the policy. These are the conditions which were violated, and accordingly, the insurer is not liable to pay the compensation. First is condition excluding use of vehicle. That means first, the vehicle was not permitted to be plied for hire and reward, and it was used for that particular purpose. Next, organized racing and speed testing. If the vehicle was being used for organized racing and speed testing, then again that can be raised as a defense. Next, if the vehicle was used for a purpose not allowed by the permit, and it's a transport vehicle. So if it's a transport vehicle and it was not used for the purpose which was allowed by the permit, then said defense can be raised in the court. Next, without the sidecar being attached where the vehicle is a motorcycle. Next condition, if violated, can also be raised in the defense is driving license. If the person who was driving the vehicle did not have a valid driving license at the time of accident, or he was disqualified from having a driving license, then said condition or violation of said condition can be raised as a defense in the court. Another condition that excludes the liability for injury caused or contributed to by conditions of war, riot, civil commutation, etc. Next, that the defense available is that the policy is void on the ground that it was obtained by non-disclosure of material fact or by representation of fact which was false in some material particulars. So, if the insured has not disclosed a fact which was material in nature or by a representation of fact which was false in some material particular, said fact can be raised as a defense in the court. Then we come to section 150, which provides for the right of third party against the insurers on insolvency of the insured. Say suppose the insured has become insolvent, then what all the rights of third parties are there? So in the event of the insured becoming insolvent, any liability incurred by the insured person and his rights against the insurer will be transferred to and vested in the third party to whom the liability was so incurred. So the insolvency of the insured will not take away the right of the third party. Next is section 151, duty to give information as to insurance. It provides that it is the duty of the insured to give information relating to the insurance on demand by or on behalf of person making the claim for compensation. So, if a particular person is making a claim for compensation, then under section 141, the insured is duty bound to give the information relating to the insurance so that the victim who is claiming compensation can make the insurer party to the proceeding in the court of law. Next, we come to section 152, that is settlement between insured and insured persons. Any settlement made by the insurer in respect of any claim which may be made by third party will not be valid unless third party is a party to the claim. So this provides that the third party needs, for a settlement to be valid by the insurer, the third party also needs to be made a party in that particular proceeding. Effect of death on certain causes of action, section 155. It provides for in the event of death of the insured after happening of the accident in which his motor vehicle was involved, then right of third party will not be barred against insured or his estate. So if a particular insured is no more and the third party has made a claim for compensation, then the right of the third party is not barred against the insured or his estate. So the claim still subsists and compensation will be given by the insurer as if the insured were alive. Section 157 is one of the most important provisions. It provides for the deemed transfer. So if we say that the insured has transferred his vehicle to some other person, then still the third party insurance subsists. It is like if the person has transferred the vehicle, the third party insurance transfers along. So even if the policy is not transferred in the transferee's name, say suppose A has transferred the vehicle to B, but this policy still is in B's name. If A has transferred the vehicle to B, and the vehicle is still in the name of insured in the name of A, even then, if there is a claim arising out of the use of that vehicle, it is still sustainable and the claim is payable by the insurer. Next, we come to section 158, that is production of certain certificates, license and permits. This provides that the duty of owner to produce certificate of insurance, RC, DL, permit, fitness, etc. when required by police. Now another important section is section 158 subsection 6, that is casting a statutory duty on the police investigating officer to submit a report form 54 as per rule 150 Central Motor Vehicle Rules to the concerned tribunal and insurance company within 30 days of intimation of the accident. This rule is very important, or this provision is very important, as such the concept of DAR, which has recently come into the picture, or which has come into picture for a long time but recently has been used for new provisions added to that. This 158 subsection 6 is an important part of that. It provides that the police has to give an information within 30 days of the intimation of the accident, and the report can be treated as a claim petition by the tribunal. Now section 160 provides for the duty of police officer and the registering authority to furnish to the person who alleges that he is entitled to claim compensation all such particulars in such form and within such time as the central government may prescribe. That means all the details have to be given to the person who alleges that he is entitled to claim a compensation. Then another case can be of hit and run. That means if a particular accident has happened and the vehicle is not identified, that means nobody knows who has caused the accident. The person is found lying on the road or the person is brought to the hospital and the identity of the vehicle is not found, then such case is called hit and run case. In such cases, we cannot make anybody a party to the proceeding, but simply there is a provision in Motor Vehicle Act that in case of hit and run, the compensation payable in case of death is 25,000, and in case of grievous hurt, it is 12,500. Now, once we have discussed section 161, which provides for hit and run cases and the payment of compensation in that regard, it is also important to know where that fund for payment comes from. It comes from a fund called Solatium Fund. Section 163 of Motor Vehicle Act provides scheme for payment of compensation under hit and run. So that is Solatium Fund, which is established by central government and administered by GIC. This Solatium Fund was established in 1989 and it came into force from 1/7/1989. To claim a compensation for hit and run under Solatium Fund, an application has to be made to the Claims Inquiry Officer of the subdivision or taluka in which the accident has taken place. The application is to be made within 6 months from the date of accident. An application made after 6 months but before 12 months from the date of accident may be accepted by the Claims Inquiry Officer if he is satisfied that there are reasonable grounds for the delay. So there is no hard and fast rule that you have to make it under 6 months. You have to preferably make it under 6 months, but you can make it before 12 months as well. But you have to give reasons for the same, and the Claims Inquiry Officer, has to be satisfied with those reasons. Then, on the receipt of all required reports from the Claims Inquiry Officer, the Claim Settlement Commissioner sanctions the claim as far as possible within a period of 15 days from the date of receipt of such report. The payment is made usually within 15 days from the date of receipt of the sanction order from the Claim Settlement Commissioner. This is the procedure how one can claim a compensation for a hit and run case. Now we come to section 163A. This section 163A was brought into Motor Vehicle Act by the amendment in 1994, which provided for a compensation on a structured formula basis. This underwent an amendment in year 2018, and the liability for the payment of compensation, that means the quantum of compensation, was also increased and the structured formula was done away with. Now, section 163 provides that the compensation is payable on a no-fault basis, and that means negligence or default of driver or owner need not be proved by the claimant. Compensation to be computed as second schedule limited to those victims who had income up to 40,000 per annum. So this structured formula basis, that is second schedule, and this 40,000 per annum income is done away with now. After the amendment in 2018, the compensation payable for death will be 5 lakhs flat, and for permanent disablement cases, as defined earlier, the percentage of disability on rupees 5 lakh, that is disablement percentage, is as per WC Act, or as we should say, Employees Compensation Act schedule. Minimum compensation is 50,000. So, say suppose the disablement is 40%. So, the compensation payment for permanent disablement is 5 lakh into 40%, that is percentage of disablement into 5 lakh. For minor injuries, fixed compensation is 25. Now we come to chapter 12 of Motor Vehicles Act, which provides about the claims tribunals. So first of all, there is an all-important question in examination: and who constitutes a tribunal? Generally, the notion is the High Court or Supreme Court or District Court, whatever it may be. These were the options generally given. But in effect, actually, it's the state government that forms the claims tribunal. It is as mentioned in section 165 of Motor Vehicles Act. The notification is to be made in the official gazette by state government in consultation with the High Court of such area as specified. That means it is the state government that constitutes the tribunal, not the High Court or the Supreme Court for that matter. The qualification for appointment for the presiding officer of the Motor Accident Claims Tribunal, it should be the High Court judge or district judge, or a person who is qualified to be appointed as a district judge or High Court judge. So this is about the constitution of tribunal. There is one question definitely is going to be asked in examination: who constitutes the claims tribunal? So here they have we have to say that it's the state government. Next is section 166. Now earlier in section 140 and section 163A, we have already observed that the compensation is paid on a no fault liability basis. That means the negligence on part of the vehicle need not be established. If there is an insurance and there is an accident, vehicle involved, the accident is payable irrespective of the fact that the driver of the vehicle was negligent or not. But in earlier cases, there was a limit to the compensation. Say under 163A, it was 5 lakh or 25,000 or percentage of 5.5 lakhs as per disability. In case of section 140, it is 50,000 and 25,000. But in case of section 166, the compensation is paid on fault liability basis. That means the negligence on part of the insured vehicle driver has to be established in order to claim compensation. And there is another important aspect to this section is there is no limit on compensation. That means earlier there was a limit prescribed for the quantum of compensation. Here there is no limit. Higher the income, higher the compensation. Simple. It's a plain and simple fact. So there is no limit on the income which can be taken for the victim. If the victim is working as a person of not having a fixed income, then notional income will be taken. Otherwise, the actual income of the victim will be taken. And as I have already explained, negligence has to be pleaded. Negligence has to be pleaded. Without negligence being pleaded, compensation is not payable under section 166 of Motor Vehicles Act. Then legal representatives left over to be added as respondents. Say sometimes what happens is all the legal representatives of the victim in case of death are not joined as a petitioner. Means they have not claimed a compensation as a petitioner and they have not claimed compensation as such. So in such cases, there may be a possibility that they may file a duplicate case in future. Say suppose mother and father of a particular person. The wife has claimed compensation. Mother and father have not claimed. They have not been added to as a petitioner. So there may be a case in future that they will ask for a compensation for the death of their son. To avoid such cases, the legal representatives who are left over, they need to be added as respondents and made a party to the proceeding. Earlier, before 1994 amendment, there was a limitation in filing compensation. Now that limitation was removed with effect from 14/11/1994, and there is no limit as such. But generally, courts consider it on a reasonable basis. That means if there is an unreasonable delay, say 10 years, 12 years, the courts sometimes they do not entertain the application as well. And another important thing, the petitioner need not even file the petition for compensation. There is a provision in section 158 subsection 6 whereby the police has to send an intimation to the tribunal and the tribunal shall treat any such report of accident forwarded to it under section 158 subsection 6 as an application for compensation under this act. So this is what the section 166. The compensation claim for compensation made under section 166 has to be on a fault liability basis and there is no limitation for this. Plus there is no limit to that compensation. It can be crores and crores of rupees. Another important thing is where to file a compensation. Where the compensation can be filed means, I mean, if the accident has taken place, okay, but where can we file the compensation claim? So section 166 subsection 2 provides that it can be either the place of accident or the place where the claimant resides or the place of defendant. Defendant as in the company. So this question also generally comes in examination, where can the claim for compensation be filed? So we can have to be like, no, we can opt for either of the options and we have to be very careful about with our choices that it can be either of these three places. There may be an option that all the three places or either of the three places. So we have to be clear that either of the three places the claimant can choose to file a claim for compensation. Next, we come to another tricky situation in Motor Vehicles Act. We have seen that under section 147, liabilities under Employees Compensation Act are also covered. So does that mean that the person can claim compensation under MACT as well as WC? No. That it means that the person has an option to claim under either MACT or under Employees Compensation Act. So it cannot be claiming from both the places. This is provided under Section 167 of Motor Vehicles Act that the claim for compensation can be made under either Motor Vehicles Act under MACT or under Employees Compensation Act with the Employees Commission. So it cannot be at both the places. If the claim is already settled at MACT, we can take such defense in WC that such claim is not maintainable. Next is passing of award by tribunal as mentioned in Section 168. Section 168 provides for once the proceedings are initiated at the tribunal, the notice has to be sent to the insurer. That means if this notice has not been sent to the insurer and they have not been made a party, then we do not have any liability. That is why the tribunal necessarily has to issue a notice to the insurer for it to be made a party to the proceedings. The proceedings are summary in nature. And there is opportunity of hearing given to all the parties. The compensation provided under Motor Vehicles Act by the MACT should be a just compensation. Just compensation basically is the compensation which the court thinks just and reasonable to compensate the victim. There is no subjectification to it, and it is an objectively calculated compensation. Just compensation may be for lakhs as well as crores of rupees. It has to be decided by the tribunal, and it need not be restricted to the amount which is claimed by the person. If the tribunal feels that the amount of just compensation is more than what the claimant has demanded or claimant has sought for, then if the court feels so, it can award the same, more than the amount that is claimed. Section 168 also provides that the copy of award has to be delivered within 15 days. For that, the application has to be made, and within 15 days of the application, the copy of award has to be delivered. Then the award has to be satisfied within 30 days. Generally, the tribunal in its order writes that the said award has to be satisfied within 30 days of the receipt of the award. So this is basically about the procedure that is followed by the tribunal. In an extended version of this, the procedure and powers of tribunal are also defined under Section 169. That means it has the powers of civil court. As such, we have seen that normally most of the provisions of civil procedure code are followed by the tribunal. Say suppose that attendance of witnesses, execution and all, written statement, claims. But so the powers of the civil court are exercised by the tribunal. And as we have already discussed that it's a summary procedure, and the tribunal is also empowered to seek the help of a person with special knowledge, as in if the particular subject matter of the claim requires a person of special knowledge or person with having expertise of that area to come and depose regarding the same, the court can require his or her attendance. The court can also enforce attendance of witnesses and compelling the discovery and production of documents and material objects. That means that if the person who is a party to the proceeding demands the court that some document has to be produced before the court or some witness has to be examined before the court is well within its power to compel the attendance of the witness or the discovery and production of document or material objects. So now that when we have studied about the procedures of the claims tribunal and how it makes the necessary parties a party to the proceeding and then issues the notices and all. But sometimes what happens is the owner or the insured, he or she does not attend the proceedings or is said ex parte. Ex parte in the sense they have not at all come for the proceeding even if the notice is issued to them. Or there may be a case that the owner or oblique insured has colluded with the claimant. That means they are in collision with the claimant. They are not appearing, or maybe they are acting in favor of the claimant. So in such cases, the insurers can file an application under Section 170 or I should say a petition under section 170 to the court to grant us the right to contest the claim on all or any of the grounds that are available to the vehicle owner. So if the court allows it, the insurer will have all the grounds available, even if it was earlier available to the insured or the owner. Now, if the insurer can also claim the such grounds if the court allows so. That is provided under section 170 of the Motor Vehicle Act. So generally, if you see in the claim file, there is a 170 application, 170 application. This basically is section 170 application. Next, about the interest quotient. Once the award is passed by the tribunal, it generally carries a certain rate of interest. The rate of interest is not fixed as such because different tribunals consider different rates of interest as reasonable. But one thing is common in all the awards, that the date from which the interest is being paid. Generally, the interest is paid from the date of filing of petition. That is mentioned in section 171 that simple interest may be awarded on the compensation from the date not earlier to the date of claim, that is date of filing of petition. That means all the tribunal judgments, if you see, will see that the interest at the rate of such and such percent from the date of filing of petition has to be allowed. That is provided under section 171. So if there is a question that interest under Motor Vehicle Act is provided under which section, we have to write section 171. Then we come to section 173, that is appeal. So appeal, if we have to make against the order of tribunal, it has to be made within 90 days of the receipt of the order. That means if the order is delivered to you within 90 days, you can file an appeal. But still, if the amount is less than 10,000 or 10,000, there is no appeal. There is no appeal against such award. It has been provided in section 163 that the amount in dispute below 10,000 is no appeal. Also, there is a statutory condition that if we have to file appeal, then we'll have to deposit either 25,000 or 50% of the award amount, whichever is less. Say, suppose in case the amount awarded is 60,000 or say 1 lakh. Then if we have to appeal against that award, we'll have to deposit 25,000. That means 50% of the award amount or 25,000, whichever is less. So in case 50% of the award amount is 50,000 and next is 25,000, so we have to deposit 25,000. But suppose in case the award is 40,000, then in that case we'll have to deposit 20,000 because it is less than 25,000. What the section says, 25,000 or 50% of the awarded amount, whichever is less. So in this case, if the award amount is 40,000, 50% of the award amount is 40,000. So that is less than 25, so we have to deposit 40,000 rupees. This can also be a question in the examination, that if certain amount is awarded, if appeal has to be filed, what is the amount to be deposited? So there we have to be careful that it is either 25,000 or 50% of the awarded amount, whichever is less. Now that we have seen the main provisions of Motor Vehicles Act, we shall now go through some other important sections of Motor Vehicles Act from which there may be a direct question in the examination. For example, section 180 provides a punishment for allowing unauthorized person to drive the vehicle. Similarly, section 181 is providing punishment for driving the vehicle in contravention of section 3 or section 4, that is the driving license. I mean, if the person is driving the vehicle without having a license, he will be punished under section 181. These sections you will find in the charge sheet or in the FIR. Then section 183 is driving in excessive speed. Section 184, driving dangerously. Drunken driving, section 185. One thing is to be noted is that drunken driving is now made a defense under the amended Motor Vehicles Act 2019, which is yet to come in force. So this is an important section which we need to remember. Section 186, driving by a mentally unfit person. Section 189, racing and speed trials. Similarly, using vehicles in unsafe conditions, section 190. Section 192, using vehicle without registration. So if you're using a vehicle without registration, you can be booked under section 192. Similarly, section 192A is using the vehicle without permit. Then 194, driving with excessive weight. 196, driving of uninsured vehicle. See, section 146 provides for the compulsory insurance of the vehicle, and if you are not doing so, you can be punished or under section 196 of Motor Vehicles Act. Then section 197 is taking vehicle without the authority. Having gone through the Motor Vehicles Act, now we should see some of the provisions of Indian Penal Code which are relevant to Motor Vehicle Act, because in the charge sheet or FIR generally we see these sections available. Say section 279, rash driving in public place. Section 337, causing simple injury due to rash and negligent driving. Section 338, causing grievous injury due to rash and negligent driving. 304A, one of the most prominent sections which is seen in the FIR and charge sheet and all. 304A, causing death due to rash and negligent driving. 320 is grievous hurt. After having gone through all the legal provisions of Motor Vehicle Act, Indian Penal Code, amendments in Motor Vehicle Act, etc., now basically we come to a point where we have to calculate the compensation. That means everything said and done, all the legal provisions have been gone through. So how do we calculate the compensation that is to be paid to the victim? So that is different in death as well as the injury case. For death, the calculation is different. For injury, the calculation is different. I will not be going into the details of calculation of compensation because that may not be the question that is going to be asked in examination. But what we need to know is the factors which influence the calculation of compensation in case of death as well as in case of injury. So if we know the factors which are influencing the calculation, then we will be able to make the calculation in a very swift manner. So in death cases, first thing, age of the victim, because the factor is decided according to that. Income, because income, if we take the income, then only we can calculate the future loss of income or loss of dependency for that matter. And marital status, what it should be the deduction towards personal expenses and all these personal expenses, the marital status and deduction towards personal expenses and all, that we'll see in the later slides where we'll discuss about Sarla Verma and Pranay Sethi table. We shall see about the deduction towards personal expenses, what are the future prospects and all. Now I am just giving you a brief on the factors which are there for calculation of compensation. So in death cases, age, income, marital status to calculate personal expenditure, and medical expenses. Of course, if it's in case of death, if the person has gone to the hospital, got himself treated or herself treated, and then died subsequently, the same can also be claimed as a part of compensation. So age of the victim is for the factor on which the compensation will be calculated. Income for loss of dependency, marital status for personal expenses deduction, and medical expenses. Injury cases, in case of injury, again the age of victim for the factor, income again for what is the loss of earning for future, then loss of earnings, what during the course of treatment that there was no earning for that particular person, so the loss of earning has to be calculated according to that. And loss of earning capacity for future, say suppose after the treatment the person is partially able to work but not fully, so what exactly is the loss of earning capacity? Here we need to know is that the compensation in case of injury is calculated according to the loss of earning capacity, not the physical disability. The physical disability may be 30, 40, 50%, but there may be 100% loss of earning capacity. Say suppose in case of a driver, if he loses one of his leg, the physical disabilities are 50% or more than that. But the loss of earning capacity is 100% because that person will not be able to drive in future. So in injury cases, the loss of earning capacity for future has to be taken care of. Then medical expenses with the cost of treatment, and marital status for the sake of calculating the compensation and what exactly was his expenditure and all. So marital status is not that important, but yeah, we need to consider the same as well. While calculating compensation, the courts generally, apart from the amount of compensation, the courts generally award damages to the victim. These damages means the compensation to the victim, and these damages can be either special or general damages. The difference between them is that Special damages can be quantified in terms of money and general damages cannot be quantified in terms of money. The court has to arrive at a conclusion that this much can be awarded under general damages, whereas the special damages are quantifiable in terms of money. So what are special damages? We'll just look at some of them, like loss of earning, transportation to hospital, extra nourishment, medical expenses, and funeral expenses. All these can be quantified. It means you can say that you have spent this much amount on this particular thing. So this can be quantified. Whereas in case of general damages, say suppose compensation for pain and suffering, that cannot be quantified. The kind of pain a person has suffered or the kind of mental agony the person has gone through cannot be quantified in terms of money. But the court, taking into account the nature of injury or the nature of accident, they award certain amount towards general damages. Say suppose compensation for continuing permanent disability, compensation for loss of earning power, loss of expectation of life. These all things cannot be quantified exactly in terms of money. Now, as we have seen how the compensation is calculated, we'll just look at the table which was given in Sarla Verma versus Delhi Transport Corporation case, a landmark case which was the basis of the calculation of Motor Vehicle Act accident cases for a long time, and till now we are following it. The recent judgment of Pranay Sethi is also taking reference from Sarla Verma case only. So in Sarla Verma case, basically the court has given the age band and the multiplier, and the age band is for 5 years each, and the multiplier. If there is a question in examination on what exactly is the multiplier between different age bands, just remember one thing. Up the multiplier starts from 18. Say suppose from the age of 15 to 20 the multiplier is 18. Then it reduces by one count up to the age of 50. Say suppose 21, 25. 21 to 25 is same. Another important thing, I just missed it right now. 15 to 20 and 21 to 25 is the same multiplier, 18. Do not be confused on that. After that, with every 5-year age band, the multiplier reduces by one count up to the age of 50. After 50, it reduces by 2 count for 5 years age band. Say suppose 51 to 55, 11, then 56 to 69. So if we keep that in mind, 15 to 20 and 21 to 25 is 18. After that, reduction by 1 up to the age of 50, and after 50, reduction by 2 up to the age of 70. So the last multiplier is 5. And multiplier for Employees Compensation Act is given under Schedule 2. That will be according to the EC Act. Now we shall see what the calculation for compensation is done away with, but we need to know that what all the combinations which are permitted by the law. That means we have seen different provisions for claiming compensation. Say suppose 140 is there for no fault liability, 163 is there, 166 is there. So there are different avenues available to the victim. But can the victim claim under all the avenues? That we shall see now. Because the nature of the compensation is such that it cannot claim the compensation under all the avenues. There are certain permitted combinations which we will discuss right now. So section 140 and section 166, they are permitted. That means a person can file a claim for compensation under section 140 and subsequently under section 166. But the point to be noted is that whatever compensation is provided under section 140, be 25,000 or 50,000, that will be deducted from the final compensation that will be awarded under section 166. Because section 140 is an interim compensation and section 166 is the final compensation. Similarly, section 140 and under EC Act or WC Act for that matter, if the compensation is provided under section 140, same will be deducted from the compensation provided under WC, or as we call it today as Employee Compensation Act. Then section 163 or section 166. See, the nature of compensation awarded under section 163A as well as 166, both are final in nature. That is not an interim compensation, either 163A or 166. So a person can claim either under section 163A or section 166, but not both. Now we shall see the prohibited combination. The prohibited combination means a person cannot claim under two sections simultaneously. Say suppose section 140 and section 163A. both are in nature of no fault liability. That's compensation on the basis of no fault liability. So it is prohibited to claim a compensation under section 140 and subsequently under section 163. This is specifically provided under section 163B. Similarly, in section 163A and section 166, as we have discussed in the earlier slide, 163A compensation and 166 compensation are both final in nature. So one person cannot claim under both the section. It has to be either 163A or 166. Specifically, Supreme Court has held this in Deepal Girish by Soni versus United India Insurance case. Now we shall see there was another important judgment in Pranay Sethi versus NIC, or I should say NIC versus Pranay Sethi. In that case, the Supreme Court, while reviewing the decision in Sarla Verma, Santoshi Devi, Reshma Kumari and Rajesh versus Rajveer cases, came up with the table of calculation for compensation and what is the personal expenses deduction, what should be the future prospect, what should be the factors. So basically the base was Sarla Verma case, but they extended it a little bit. Say suppose for bachelor, if only parents are there, then 50% deduction. If other if other younger siblings also are there as dependent, then 33%. That is for the bachelor. For married, if 2 to 3 dependents are there, 33%. If 4 to 6 dependents are there, 25, and if more than 6, then 20%. Similarly, in the addition towards future prospect, in Sarla Verma case, there was no future prospect given for the age band of 51 to 60. Now the Pranay Sethi case provides for 15%. If there is a permanent job. Similarly, in the age band 51 to 60 years for self-employed on fixed salary, there is a 10%. For those having permanent job, the actual salary that will be taken is the salary less tax. For self-employed, income, established income, or I should say less tax. Next, we shall see the general and non-pecuniary damages awarded under Pranay Sethi case. See, this is provided in the Pranay Sethi case that apart from the compensation, the victim will be provided in case of death, loss of estate 15,000, loss of consortium 40,000, and funeral expenses 15,000, total of 70,000. All the above three heads with a provision of 10% increase every 3 years. So this decision was in 2017. So if we say the decision is taking place right now, there will be an addition of 10% towards the general and non-pecuniary damages. The other important judgments I have just mentioned, you can just go through it. That is United Insurance versus Rekha, S. Rajsekharan versus Union of India, the long-term liability policy for two-wheelers and private cars. Magma General Insurance versus Nanu Ram broadened the scope. Magma General Insurance versus Nanu Ram is important case because earlier slide we have seen that there is a loss of consortium awarded for rupees 40,000. That generally was only awarded to the spouse of the victim. Magma General Insurance versus Nanu Ram case, in this Supreme Court broadened the scope of that loss of consortium. They introduced filial consortium and parental consortium. That means the children and the siblings of the victim can also claim the compensation of around same amount, 40,000. Then United India versus Sunil Kumar 163, that was an important judgment which provided that negligence cannot be pleaded by the insurer against the victim. Naveen Kumar versus Vijay Kumar, registered owner will remain liable in case of sale of vehicle. That means we have seen already in section 157. Tata AIG versus Amrit Paul Singh, absence of permit is a fundamental breach. Pay and recover. There are fundamental breach. There are so many other cases available which we can refer, but due to paucity of time and paucity of space, we will not be discussing all the important judgments. There are a new plethora of judgments on Motor Vehicle Act which we can access through the internet or on websites like Indian Qanun. Now here we shall see an example of composite negligence. In case of composite negligence, there is a difference between the case of contributory negligence and composite negligence. As we can see in this particular slide, there is a case of composite negligence, which means that there is a particular victim and the accident has caused to that victim due to the rash and negligent act of two or more vehicles. So when there are two or more vehicles involved in causing an accident, causing life or injury, causing death or injury to a particular person, that can be the case of a composite negligence. But next slide we will see a case of contributory negligence. In case C, the victim himself or herself is contributing to the accident. That means the accident would not have happened up, like in the absence of the contribution toward the accident by the victim. That means the victim also has contributed towards the accident. This is a general reference. This will not be going to be there in the examination, the difference between composite and contributory negligence. This is just for your academic reference. And with this, we come to the end of the Motor Vehicle Act and motor third party claims compensation and all the legal provisions. We wish you all the best in the examination. Stay calm, stay cool, focus on the questions, finish off the questions which you know. Later on, you can take a guess or leave alone the questions which you don't feel like answering. All the best, do well. Thank you so much.